Cold water splashed against her skin, shocking her body and making her stumble as the laughter of the uniformed men echoed across the courthouse steps. The pregnant black woman clutched her belly instinctively, her sundress clinging to her as the icy stream drenched her completely. People nearby froze, horrified, but not one of them dared step forward. The cops held the hose like it was a weapon, their sneers cutting deeper than the water. They thought they were teaching her a lesson, reducing her to a spectacle of humiliation. But what they didn't know was that the man rushing through traffic at that very moment, the man who wore the badge they claimed to protect, was her husband. And in less than an hour, their world would come crashing down. Her name was Alana, a 30-year-old woman whose gentle strength could calm storms, yet whose life had been marked by battles no one should have to fight. She was 7 months pregnant, carrying not only a child but also the weight of her community's expectations. To them, she wasn't just a woman. She was a symbol of resilience, someone who had faced discrimination her entire life, yet still held her head high. She walked to the courthouse that morning with a simple purpose: to file paperwork about property she and her husband had recently purchased. To her, it was routine. To the men who spotted her, it was an opportunity. The cops lounging near the courthouse steps had watched her approach with narrowed eyes. Their laughter was quiet at first, but it grew bolder as she walked closer. One muttered something under his breath and another grinned, grabbing the hose meant for cleaning the pavement. The street was already damp from a morning rinse, but to them it wasn't about cleaning, it was about power. And so, in broad daylight, they unleashed a torrent of water at her, as if she were less than human. Alana gasped, her body jerking from the force. She shielded her belly, stumbling back, but there was nowhere to go. People across the street watched, some raising phones but most lowering their heads. No one interfered. That was the cruel truth of these moments. Silence was safer than justice. Alana's chest burned, not just from the icy water, but from the sting of humiliation. This wasn't the first time she had been reduced in someone else's eyes to a joke or a target. But today was different. Today, she carried life within her, and the violation cut deeper. As the water sprayed over her, memories collided with the present. She thought of the nights she spent listening to her husband, Sheriff Marcus Daniels, talk about the battles he faced in uniform. A black man leading law enforcement in a county where prejudice still ran deep was a rarity, almost an impossibility. Marcus had endured threats, sneers, and even sabotage from within his own ranks. Yet he had risen, respected and feared for his unshakable sense of justice. Alana often worried about him, but never imagined she'd be the one needing his shield, the bystanders whispered. Some shook their heads in disbelief, while others turned away, unwilling to confront the ugliness playing out in public. For Alana, every second under that water felt like an eternity. Her heart pounded, her breath grew short, and her hands trembled as she tried to shield her child. She wanted to scream, but she swallowed the sound. She knew better than anyone that showing pain only fueled their cruelty. So instead, she stood, drenched, trembling, humiliated, but unbroken. Far across town, Marcus sat in his squad car, his phone buzzing relentlessly. He had been in the middle of reviewing reports when the first call came from a deputy he trusted. Then another call, then a text. The words made his blood run cold. "They're attacking your wife. Outside the courthouse. Now." Marcus slammed his foot on the gas, sirens wailing as he tore through traffic. He could picture her, his wife, his strength, the woman who had stood by him through every storm, surrounded, targeted, vulnerable. Rage and fear tangled in his chest as he weaved through cars, each second stretching longer than the last. He wasn't just a husband rushing to protect his wife. He was a sheriff racing to confront betrayal within his own badge. Meanwhile, the cops on the courthouse steps smirked, congratulating themselves as if this were nothing more than a prank. They didn't notice the small crowd growing across the street, nor the hushed murmurs of disbelief. They didn't notice the woman filming every moment, her hands shaking as she captured undeniable evidence. They thought they were untouchable, but every story has a breaking point, and this one was building toward a reckoning none of them could escape. The courthouse square shimmered with late morning sunlight, but for Alana the brightness had dimmed into a blur. Water clung to her skin, dripping from her braids, soaking into her shoes. Her arms tightened around her belly as though to form a shield between her unborn child and the cruelty pouring from that hose. The cops laughed, their amusement ringing louder than the splashes. They treated her pain like a spectacle, a performance meant to remind her that in their eyes, she didn't belong. Across the street, people shifted uneasily. Some raised phones, their screens catching the shimmer of water, the glint of badges, the grimace of a pregnant woman shivering. Others looked away, pretending not to see. They hurried down sidewalks, retreating into the safety of indifference. To stand against authority in uniform meant risk, and risk was something few were willing to take. And so the crowd became part of the cruelty, their silence as heavy as the water soaking her dress. Alana's legs trembled, but her pride refused to let her collapse. She remembered her grandmother's words, whispered in her childhood. "You may bend, but don't let them break you." That memory became her anchor. She straightened, her chin high, even as water streamed down her face. If they wanted to humiliate her, they would not have the satisfaction of watching her crumble. A few feet away, one of the cops nudged his partner. "Look at her still standing," he sneered, tightening his grip on the hose. The water surged harder, the spray rattling her ribs. Alana clenched her jaw. Pain sparked along her spine, but still she stood. She thought of her husband Marcus, his steady hands, his deep voice reminding her she was more than the labels others tried to pin on her. She thought of the life growing inside her, a child who deserved a world better than this. For them, she endured, but destiny was already in motion. Across town, Sheriff Marcus Daniels' patrol car roared through traffic, sirens piercing the air. His heart hammered, each second stretching like an eternity. The words from the call replayed in his mind. "They're attacking your wife." Marcus's grip tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. Anger surged through him, but beneath it lay fear, the kind of fear only a husband and father-to-be could know. He had worn the badge for years, facing danger from criminals and hostility from fellow officers who resented his rise. But this was different. This was personal. The car swerved onto Main Street, scattering pedestrians who looked up at the flashing lights. Marcus leaned on the horn, weaving between vehicles, his sirens demanding the road clear. Every red light became irrelevant, every stop sign a blur. All that mattered was reaching her. Back at the courthouse, the murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Someone shouted, "Stop! She's pregnant!" But the officers either didn't hear or didn't care. They laughed as the hose jerked in their grip, water spraying Alana's body like a cruel storm. Suddenly, her knees buckled. She dropped down, one hand bracing against the wet pavement, the other clutching her stomach. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. A woman screamed, "She's going to faint!" Alana's vision blurred, the world spinning in dizzy circles. She whispered a prayer under her breath, willing herself to stay conscious. And then, the sound of sirens grew louder. Louder still. Heads turned as a black and white patrol car tore around the corner, brakes screeching. The crowd scattered back instinctively, sensing something about to erupt. Marcus flung the door open before the car fully stopped. His boots struck the pavement hard, his frame towering as he strode toward the steps. His face was a storm, fury carved into every line. The crowd fell silent, whispers spreading fast. "That's the sheriff." The officers with the hose hesitated, their laughter fading as recognition dawned. Their sneers melted into unease. One dropped the hose, the stream sputtering to the ground. Alana lifted her head, her blurred vision clearing just enough to see him. Relief flooded her chest, relief and pride. Her protector had come. Marcus's eyes locked on the soaked figure of his wife, trembling but unbroken. The sight seared him, carving into his soul. He clenched his fists at his sides, his voice rising like thunder as he demanded, "Who did this?" His words weren't shouted, yet they carried across the square, sharp and cutting. The crowd pressed closer, phones raised higher now. The story unfolding was no longer just whispered injustice, it was spectacle, and witnesses would ensure it couldn't be buried. One officer stammered, "Sheriff, we were just—" Marcus cut him off with a glare so fierce it could have shattered stone. "Just what?" Just humiliating a pregnant woman? Just abusing your badge? His voice broke into a roar, the weight of his authority shaking the air. The officers glanced at each other, searching for excuses, but the words died in their throats. They knew the power dynamic had flipped. The woman they had targeted wasn't just a stranger they could intimidate. She was the sheriff's wife. Marcus bent down to Alana, his hand steadying her shoulder. Her skin was icy, her breath shallow, but when she looked at him, strength flickered back in her eyes. "I'm here." The deputies who had arrived flanked Marcus, waiting for his command. He gave a curt nod, and within seconds the offending officers were shoved against the courthouse wall, their hands yanked behind their backs. The sharp click of handcuffs echoed like a gunshot. The crowd roared, some clapping, others shouting with relief. The officers sputtered. "You can't do this, we're cops." Marcus leaned in close, his voice low but lethal. "No, you were cops. Now you're criminals." The words hit harder than any physical blow. The disgraced men sagged in the deputy's grip, their futures dissolving before their eyes. But Marcus wasn't done. He turned, his voice rising so every witness, every camera, every heart could hear, "This ends today. If you wear this badge and think it makes you untouchable, think again. If you abuse the power the people gave you, you will answer for it. I don't care if you've been on the force 20 years or 20 minutes. You disgrace this uniform, and you're done." The crowd exploded into applause. The noise so loud it drowned out the hum of passing traffic. People who had stood frozen in fear minutes before now shouted their support. A man at the back of the crowd raised his fist, others followed. The square transformed into a sea of solidarity. Alana pressed her hand to her stomach, whispering softly to the life inside her, "You'll grow up in a world where someone fought back." Marcus walked back to her, kneeling at her side, his rage softening into tenderness. He brushed a wet strand of hair from her cheek. "You're safe now," he murmured. "I promise you, nothing like this will ever touch you again." But Alana, strong even through her pain, shook her head. "Marcus, it's not just about me. It's about every woman, every black family, every person who's ever been treated like less. Don't just protect me, protect them." Her words cut deep, igniting something in him beyond personal anger. He stood once more, lifting his voice so the whole square could hear. "This isn't the end. This is the beginning. From this day forward, this department will change. Transparency, accountability, justice, those aren't just words. They're law. And if any officer can't live by that, you can turn in your badge right now." The deputies behind him straightened, some with guilt in their eyes, others with pride. The message was clear. A new era was starting, and there was no room for corruption. The crowd roared louder than before, their voices unified, their cheers shaking the very air. For the first time in years, people believed something was truly different, and in the middle of it all sat Alana, drenched but radiant, her strength undeniable. She had endured humiliation, but she had sparked transformation. What began as cruelty had ignited justice. As Marcus lifted her into his arms once more, the chants followed them. Justice. Justice, justice! And for the first time in a long time, Marcus knew they weren't just words. They were a promise. The courthouse square slowly emptied, but the echoes of that day lingered like a song the town would never forget. Clips of the incident spread like wildfire online, replayed on every news channel, retweeted thousands of times within hours. The image of two uniformed officers, handcuffed and disgraced in front of a cheering crowd, became a symbol of a turning tide. Alana sat at home later that evening, wrapped in a blanket, her damp clothes long changed, her trembling replaced with quiet strength. The soft hum of the baby monitor on the table reminded her of the life still growing inside her, fragile yet resilient. She had been humiliated, yes, but she had also been seen, and the world had seen too. Marcus entered, setting down his hat, his expression weary but firm.
His badge gleamed in the lamplight, no longer just a symbol of authority, but of responsibility.
He crossed the room, kneeling beside her, and took her hands gently in his. "They're gone," he said softly, "stripped of their badges, awaiting charges. And I've called for a full review of every complaint filed in this department for the last 5 years." Alana's eyes widened, tears filling them. You mean it? You're really going to dig that deep? Marcus nodded. I have to. What happened to you isn't just about two officers. It's about a culture that's been allowed to rot. That ends now. She squeezed his hand, pride swelling in her chest. For years, she had watched him struggle between his love for his community and the politics that often shackled his role. But today, something had broken loose in him. Something unshakable. The doorbell rang. When Marcus opened it, neighbors stood outside. Black, white, old, young, all carrying casseroles, flowers, or simple notes of encouragement. Word had spread, and the community had come not just to comfort, but to stand united. One elderly woman, her hands trembling, stepped forward. I just want to say thank you. For the first time, I feel like justice doesn't look away from us. Marcus bowed his head respectfully. Ma'am, justice should never look away. And as long as I wear this badge, it never will again. Inside, Alana watched as more and more people gathered, their voices blending into something stronger than fear. Hope. For the first time since the hose had drenched her, she smiled. Not because the pain was gone, but because it had been transformed into something greater. Her humiliation had become a spark, and Marcus, with the authority of his badge and the love of his people, was turning that spark into a flame. That night, as she drifted into sleep beside him, the chants from the courthouse echoed in her memory. Justice, justice, justice. Only now she believed them, and so did he.